Okay, so this is video number 4. Now that I've carved away the diabetes part of this chapter into a heart disease and diabetes lecture, it is amazing that it only takes me 4 videos to get through the entire carbohydrates lecture, because there's so much more in the diabetes and heart disease lecture. So this also shows kind of the way it works with insulin and glucagon, and you know, foods, you know, if you're worried about your blood sugar, you clearly want to eat foods that are usually whole foods, not processed, because whole foods will break down slower. Whole foods more likely have protein and fat. Glucose walks into the blood. It doesn't run into your body, and it gives your body's use of insulin a more measured way to, you know, gradually take in sugar and then store it as glycogen. For people who do have blood sugar issues, eating very digestible foods means you'll spike your blood sugar, and then it puts a greater demand on your insulin to work immediately and work very well. And when we talk about diabetes and type 2 diabetes, those patients do make insulin. It just doesn't work very well. So that's the challenge for them. In fact, you can actually rank, and this is started in the 1970s. You can rank foods on their ability, and this is a little bit of John making up a term, to spike or plateau your blood sugar. So you can rank foods, are they spikers or plateauers? Yes, I made those words up. And the reason why you're doing this is, for people who have blood sugar issues, you're trying to choose foods that don't digest so quickly. They overwhelm your ability to digest, ship, and store the sugar. You don't want your blood sugar staying high for long periods of time. We'll talk about that when we get to the diabetes section of the semester. But let's just hint, sugar's not good for the body. So if you look at all these foods here, peanuts, bean sprouts, grapefruit, these either don't have a lot of simple sugars, like low-fat yogurt or peanuts, or, interestingly, the kind of sugar they do have is not glucose related, it's fructose related. So apples do have a lot of carbohydrate. Most people know that. Apples are very sweet. And in fact, apples have so much fructose in them that they really aren't considered diabetes unfriendly. They're somewhat considered diabetes friendly, even though they have a lot of sugar, because glucose is blood sugar. When you eat apples, your liver has to convert the fructose to glucose, and it does. But when you eat things that are high in fructose corn syrup, that's not an apple amount of fructose. That's a nuclear bomb amount of fructose, and that may overwhelm your liver's ability to convert the fructose to glucose. And that's why many doctors suggest that it actually causes the liver to make fat. Okay. Now, you know, apples are high in fructose because they're so dang sweet. And I skipped a slide. I'm going to come back to it, because if you rank sugars, and usually sucrose, table sugar, is the reference, look at fructose. It's about 50% sweeter. There's a reason why fruit tends to be sweeter than flour or than bread, because fruit has a lot of fructose. Lactose, milk, has very little sweetness. By the way, if you break down the lactose into glucose and galactose, galactose runs right about here. Both of those are sweeter than lactose. And if you buy Lactaid brand milk, which the dairy adds lactase to the milk, it breaks the lactose in the milk, and you end up buying a milk which is completely fine for lactose intolerant folks and is a sweeter product, because the resultant sugars are each sweeter than lactose. And these are all your fake sugars down here. These don't provide energy to the body. They are extremely sweet. There's saccharin, which goes back to the 1970s. It's extremely sweet. There's NutraSweet, was aspartame. I think there's stevia. Where is my... I don't see... I was looking for equal. I don't see equal here, but there's a reason why when you use a sugar packet that's fake sugar, there's so little in there, because it's just so dang sweet. Yes, very sweet fruit is sweet because of fructose. And, side note, fructose has different shapes. When it's cold, it has a sweeter shape. So always chilling fruit or chilling apple juice will make for a sweeter product. These down here either have less carbohydrate, they're more complex, they break down slower, there's fat, there's protein, And so they don't plateau your blood sugar versus these ones. But they don't spike it. When you get down to the bottom, the glucose tablets, baked potato, popcorn, watermelon, these are so quickly digested. It's almost as if you're just drinking glucose water. Isn't it funny that white bread will raise your blood sugar quicker than a Snickers bar? But it's loaded in sugar, Professor, and it's loaded in fat too, the Snickers bar. That slows down digestion. Honey is loaded in fructose. So it's not as sweet, if it's not as potent on your blood sugar as white bread. White bread is starch in water, basically. And when you eat white bread, it's just a strand of glucose. All you have to do is disassemble and spike your blood sugar. Okay. What happens if you don't eat? What happens if you do skip a meal and your liver runs out of glucose? So when that happens, the body starts to transition into a starvation response. And before you're kind of in the full starvation process, where you're breaking down all your body for energy and for parts, you transition after, let's say, 12 hours of not eating food into what we call ketosis. And what ketosis is a means by which we can still feed the brain something when we run out of glucose. The brain loves glucose. So when your liver has broken down all its available glycogen into glucose, because glucagon tells it to do so, and then it just runs out of glucose, you start to have low blood sugar, right? And then after that, you start to transition into ketosis. And what ketosis is a means by which we take body fat, which is not a carbohydrate, and the brain doesn't really like body fat. It wants sugar. It wants glucose. But you take the body fat and you break into these little tiny molecules called ketones. Acetone, which is in fingernail polish, is made in the body when the body's in ketosis. And when you're in ketosis, you feed your brain then, yes, ketones made from body fat and glucose made from breaking down body protein. So you will start to use your protein for fuel eventually. You don't want to, but you will. So I call it flex fuel. When you're in ketosis, you are feeding your brain glucose made from protein and ketones made from fat. How do you know you're in ketosis? Ketones are very pungent. Acetone is in fingernail polish remover. It's a very powerful, volatile molecule. You will smell ketones coming off your breath. You will smell ketones coming off your skin. And so as soon as you eat again, your body shifts away from ketosis and goes back into the insulin glucagon kind of regulation pathway. Okay. All right. And then last, what is hypoglycemia? Low blood sugar. This can happen because you haven't eaten for a long time. There are some folks who tend to run very low blood sugar. It's actually very rare. When you have very low blood sugar, again, if you haven't eaten for 8 to 12 hours, generally that drives your desire to go eat. As soon as you eat, you will correct your blood sugar levels within a short period of time, and then make insulin, store that excess glucose as glycogen, so then you can access that glycogen from your liver later when the pancreas releases glucagon. Glycogen, glucose, glucagon. Remember, don't shoot the messenger. That's it for my 4 videos for this chapter.